Okay, assuming everyone is in this Zoom, we are calling the meeting to order at 7:04. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone who's here tonight. Um, Thrilled to see all of you folks here this evening. First regular board meeting of the year of 2025. So we want to
Want to eat with me? I have
thank
to
you for
listen to
being
this.
here and look forward to getting some things finalized with the regulations.
Go into this, sit and listen to them. I have no interest in listening, and you're going to have to pay attention to. So eating is kind of just eating together is kind of just.
Someone has an open mic.
So we want to go ahead and approve the agenda. We have posted that. Any edits to the agenda? Richard, I propose to approve the minutes. The agenda for the meeting, for tonight's meeting. Second by Leslie. Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, so carried. So for the agenda, and now we need to approve the minutes from the December 18th and January 30th meetings. So the minutes from both of these meetings. Richie Bryan I am proposing the approval of the minutes from the December 18th and January 30th meetings as written.
I'd like to make a change.
Okay, well, is someone seconding that? Leslie, are you seconding? Okay, Sue, you said that you have one edit?
Yes, from January 30th minutes on page 4, on the third paragraph. Susan recommended the community of for 2028 should be 2026. If you would change that to 2026, please.
Okay, we will go ahead and make that edit after the meeting this evening. Thank you for that. Any other edits to the minutes? We will go ahead and approve those meeting minutes. All in favor? None opposed? So moved. Okay, so we have some updates from December until now. The board has met with different groups of folks, some one-on-one meetings, gathering feedback related to the regulations. There's been some good feedback from the community. We have heard the concerns from the public, from both interpreters, from hearing, from deaf, from many different folks within the community and from different areas as well. Give me a minute. Okay. From different areas and from different work groups, from different groups. We have had senators reach out to us. We have replied to some of their questions. In addition, we have taken a look at the regulations and meeting with the Assistant Attorney General to discuss a few points in relation to that. We are addressing some public concerns as well. So that is the work that the board has been doing. Anything I'm missing out on? Anything to add from the board? Thank you all. So I would like to call upon Ashila to provide the You want me to do Ashla? Good evening, everyone. So it's great to see everyone. I will move forward with my report. So first of all, I do want to let you know that I am currently working with DSD, which is the Division of State Documents, to work on the regulations. They are currently pending with DSD, waiting on the outcome from this meeting this evening. The next submission, when being questions about when the next clean submission will be submitted, as soon as I receive that, you will know the date of the next submission. Anything related to open comments, public comments? That will be after the next clean copy of regulations is submitted. Those will be shared with everyone because we want to make sure that the most updated copy is what is shared. Related to the deputy director, we do have an offering for 2 positions, but we are waiting to hear back from HR. We have reviewed 3 individuals we've done 3 rounds of interviews for both positions, and offers have been shared with the Human Resources Office. The PCRID seat, the Potomac, they actually just had their election of new officers. So we are excited and are congratulating PCRID. So we will be seeking the names of those folks and also the appointed offices. So we will be aggressive in getting those names as soon as legislative session closes. So do you have any questions for me? Any questions for me from the board? Leslie?
Yes, I do have one question. Awesome. I will say first off that the discussion has occurred with the community and the board members' positions, that several people have applied previously, and that update is on going for that position.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes. So they have not given me the update of the names of any of the individuals who have been appointed. I know that there is a community position that is also vacant. Richie Bryant? Legislation session ends when, so that I have a good idea of a timeline. So we predict that it will be finishing up within the month. And then, so my understanding is that the first bills to be signed will be on April 8th, which means that all the bills that have gone through will be processed then. So I would guess the first or second week of May would be the conclusion of legislative session. Thank you. Anything further from the board? Any questions? Anything else? Thank you for the
Thank you for the report.
So I can have Tanea talk about the portal update. Thank you. And here is Tanea.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful that we're all here together today. Everyone's tired, maybe a little bit, but the update for the portal is that I'm working on that, the soft and hardware.
The soft and hard launch dates.
When you will see that portal as well as the internet will be updated.
Mhm.
That's my report. Thank you. Just good to see you all.
Question from Jacob. Prior to last meeting, you did have a discussion about different groups who took a look at, who reviewed, maybe focus groups who reviewed the portal. I think they were focus groups who were reviewing during like some beta testing of the portal. What is the plan related to that? Right now, we don't have all of those micro details, so we're still working on putting those together before sharing those. So this is Leslie.
Some clarification from the board. We had a discussion during our monthly meeting about that soft or hard launch, that we'd have an opportunity to give a test to it in-house before it went out, so we could get, go through with any detail, any kind of adjustments that needed to be made.
Yeah,
Yes, we don't want to share everything yet until all those adjustments are made. So this will cause less confusion in the end. So first we'll do that testing in-house and make sure we're all on the same page before it goes out to the community wide. So yes, we will have that soft and then a hard launch date.
anything further from the board? Any further questions for Tanaya? Okay, thank you so much, Tanaya, for your report. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And Ashila, are you finished with the GODHH updates? The Governor's Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing updates? Ashila? Ashila? Are you finished with your updates from the Governor's Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing? Yes, thank you for asking. All right, thank you. Okay, so for reports, we have not received reports currently. One of the reasons why we're meeting tonight, one of our focuses on tonight's meeting is the regulations. So we approved the draft of the regulations in the fall. So that has been over 6 months ago. And the board has met, the special groups have met, and we have made some edits to the regulations. So it's definitely time to make our regulations more current and open it up for review and also for comment. So we want the most current version. So we have made some edits to the regulations, and we will go through these edits this evening, and I will share my screen. And what we will do is we'll review a page, and then we will stop sharing so that we can go through discussion, and that will be our
I want to add one thing in here that all the community knows: they will have an opportunity to vote on this before it is passed. So to make sure you have an opportunity to actually see the language, it will be presented both in ASL and in English. So as we get closer and to avoid any kind of delays, we want to give you opportunity to have an open discussion, including all of us. There will be a open time, 30 days of comment that will be available for everyone to go through the full process a second time. And to save us some time, we will do that now. Then we will all go off and withdraw for a time period so you can look at this. And this will give you a time to make comments, which will make the whole process quicker.
Okay, any further comment before I go ahead and start sharing my screen? Seeing none, I will proceed to that. Okay, can everyone see that screen? Are you able to read the print? Is it legible? Is everyone okay? Sue, Richie, Leslie, Paige, everyone good? All right, I'm going to go a little further down on the document. Okay. Richie, are you good?
Yeah. Mhm.
Good.
And
Okay.
when
If you look at where the green marked language is, it's saying that American Sign Language means a distinct language specific to the United States and parts of Canada that is a visual spatial method of communication involving the hands, arms, facial markers, and body movements to communicate with others, including through the conveyance of thoughts, words, emotions, and grammatical information. So I am going to stop sharing my screen for a moment so we can go back to discussion. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up for discussion is because that says ASL. And we did receive some feedback from community members asking, what does that mean for PSE? What does it mean for SEE, Pigeon Signed English, SEE, Signed Exact English, for tactile, for pro-tactile languages? Does that satisfy the definition if we're talking about these other forms of sign language? And the reason I think we did we did receive comments from a mother who has a son who is deafblind, who does not know, is not fluent in sign language. However, she does have a method of communicating with her son who is deafblind, and the parents, get paid through the state or through some division. Um, So the parents use total communication often with their son who is deafblind. And I think they were kind of thinking about how this would be defined as it relates to them. And then this brought up the points of SEE, other methods of sign language.
what I wonder about is that if there are other areas in the regulations that we can name PSEE, I call that out as part of a specialized interpreting services. So maybe that could be put into the document and related to maybe an assessment. I'm not sure of the word that would be used for that.
EIPA?
Okay, so the EIPA would make that a requirement within ASL. It's a skill set. So my thoughts here would be to have that defined, what that means, that acronym. So for those people who don't know, as well as give time to describe everything along the way. I'm sorry. To explain the other methodologies that could be used. I'd like to see that put in the document. ASL, PSEE. Yes, Leslie. The EIPA is one of the places this language does appear. It really depends on how they set up the test. So you can choose which one. Are you choosing the ASL interpretation opportunity or the
And that falls under education.
so then in making that decision, you could be stuck. And some interpreter programs in whole will have you practice one or the other, whether it's signed exact English or it's ASL. And there's sort of a spectrum within that, a ASL to PSE to SEE. So again, I would say that somewhere on that continuum, it still would be covered, similar to tactile interpreting request. We wouldn't automatically identify a person who is deafblind, but we would use that under the canopy of SEE. So this specific situation that we're talking about would possibly leave us stuck without that delineation. So when you ask about total communication, we wouldn't address that specifically. My definition of total communication to someone else's could be different. So that could be a gray area. So how we describe interpretation and signing abilities could be supported. We're now talking about the grammar structure of the language. If that language itself, from a perspective of the consumer, is total communication.
Richie, Brian? I'm just thinking about this sentence and thinking more abstract about this definition and who we are servicing. We are providing services. The services are going to be provided for the community. So that doesn't mean that it's automatically going to be labeled as one. I think that including the continuum is what's important. It's the same as English. English has ranges and registers, and it can address folks who are within spoken English. So I think with ASL, within sign language, we can encompass what we're trying to include. And also, I think that this is more of a snapshot of this description because this terminology is going to be used again and again throughout the regulation. So I think this is more of an introduction that we are presenting. It's Jacob. Yes, Richie, I agree. The ASL could be encompassing more than just one limited version. For example, if a person, let's say, we don't want to create any loopholes to be interpreted a certain way. So for example, so when we talk about the total communication, if we have a child who is deafblind, like I mentioned earlier, and they use home signs, for example, would that apply to that same situation? I'm not so much wanting to draw attention to home signs or limited proficiency folks, but I think that all of the above could be included. And the interpreters will use their discretion in providing services within choosing the modality most appropriate for the consumer is more so what I'm thinking of. Paige?
I'd like to have just a follow-up here to that. We can't explain every situation for each person. It would become too large and too deep of a document. We have to look back at the regulations and put in some very clear yet simple language that recognizes language need.
And the needs for the language for clients.
So interpreting services can be provided. I think ASL is, in using that, ASL would be our
primary focus
to provide that service. That would be at the heading. And then from there, we can add subheadings to that to identify all these modulations, and which just comes down to communication.
I agree. Leslie?
If also we need to be careful not to do harm. Maybe there is this unique person that has a unique approach to language. Interpreters often will ask an agency, or when they're offered an assignment, language preferences. Most of the times, a deaf person would say ASL, but it could be more of a signed English presentation. So, I mean, you have to have that flexibility to understand the unique need and match that. So sometimes more expansion is required, or whatever the situation.
And it may just come down to ethics. So it seems that we would like to add one or two more sentences, acknowledging the needs of the deaf consumer or specific modalities. So what we can work on one or two sentences that we will add to this section.
Is it possible that we can have this up on the primary screen so we can see it and work on that and make adjustments as we go?
Richie, yes. In reading this, I'm looking at line number 9 when it talks about providing services, and it says convey meaning through emotions. Where do you see that, Richie? I'm looking down at line 9.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see this? I'm sorry, I'm not seeing what you're seeing. I'm not seeing that. Under definition, I think, if you go further down, and it looks like line number 9, where the law is listed. Okay, let me take a look. Okay, so there's a definition and then it's below that. Oh, okay, number 9. I am sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I misunderstood, says Jacob. Oh. So, so
Sorry.
So I think in that line, this is Sue. We list several definitions and we're listing several languages, so it could mean any of those. I'm going to share. I'm going to share this for Paige's benefit as well. I'm going to share my screen so we can all take a look at this line that we're referring to. Okay, so where it says number 9. Paige.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. So who just had their hand up? Was it Richie? No.
I just see that, this is Sue speaking, that on line 9, I had it covered. So the mode of communication, I believe, then it becomes a little sticky. If, however, you go out and explain each word and its
Right.
meaning, its definition, and what it says, and that implication, then what SEE is and PSE, I think we're really covered by it. As total communication to me is just another mode. So that's my interpretation of this part of line 9. A.
Leslie?
Also, if we all agree with this part that we're covered in this regulation, we can put this in, keep it in here. Second is that I think it brings us back to the situation
With the parents.
that that the law would provide that licensure or the applicant who has the licensure.
And volunteer services as well. We need to address that. Richie? My instant thought is that it's important for the licensure to represent, for people to be able to go through an assessment and to be able to evaluate whether or not, whether it's PSC, sign language, if it's all of those niches, if there's no evaluation, then there's really no way to be able to have a standardization. I think going back to, we need to rely on,
Validation.
um, Paige is talking. Oh yeah, cute speech. This is Paige. In watching your comments, it made me think of cued speech, right? Does Maryland have providers of cued speech? This is Jacob. I feel like the licensure should apply to sign languages. Cued speech, I don't believe falls under that. I think that is separate from what we are accomplishing with these regulations. This is Paige. Do you feel like this is clear, Leslie?
Cued speech would also include people using English with sign language support. Truly, I think that takes us off point. I understand that this is, maybe a side, and I understand your point, but at the same time, we have to think about the full community because depending on where you live, there are communities of people that use cued speech. And we have interpreters that have that skill set as a profession. So if we really think about it, maybe this is a discussion we should hold for the moment and continue later. But I would like to come back to my questions. Are we aware of any kind of research or investigation into this cued speech? Is it considered a natural language or not?
This is a board meeting. This is not a venue for public comment. Okay, so did that camera just go off? Okay. I think it was important to let everyone know that this is a board meeting and this is a board discussion. You are welcome to view the discussion, but we are not allowing any interruptions or interjections within this discussion. Okay.
Richie, I missed your comment.
Back to what I was saying. It was cute. Were we talking about the cute speech? I think, what were you just saying? Oh, you know what? That interruption just
You know what? Just
lost
keep the
my train
process
of
going.
thought.
Let's continue with the meeting and we can come back to this
Okay.
topic. That was Paige.
Okay. So are we satisfied with the definition and what is listed on the first page, Leslie?
I'd like to be able to quote from the law, please.
Yes. Yes, sure thing. Okay, so for right now, just to clarify, pending further research, this regulation focuses more on signed language, and for right now, we are not including cued speech. There was one thing I think that we have to remind ourselves of is that the regulations is not the be all end all, that there will be times where we have annual reviews and we may revisit some of this language. It's important to remember that whatever we decide tonight may not be the final draft, and it may not be, like I said, the end all be all. So that's just a good self-reminder. Okay, so I'm going to say that we can move forward with the second page, barring any opposition to that. Okay, page on the second page. Everyone good?
Yep, good.
Page, you good?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yep.
I'm good, says Richie. Paige, are you good?
Yes, I am.
Leslie, you done too?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
I was looking.
And this talks about VRI. So video remote interpreting is also known as video virtual interpreting, where any party that is utilizing sign language interpreting services are remote. Okay, so the reason why we had this up for discussion when we talk about VRI prior to COVID, so pre-COVID time, we had VRI services. It would be on a screen. Some would call it an iPad on a stick, and it could appear in doctor's offices and the like. And then COVID hit and our world got turned upside down. So we had to pivot to virtual interpreting. I mean, sometimes that person was in another room, sometimes the interpreter was in another room, the client was in another room, the speaker was in another room. And we were trying to make sure that everyone had a seat in the conversation. So do you feel like this definition that we have listed satisfies the thought that we are trying to convey?
Yes.
Um, let me just, this is Richie. Yeah, yeah, I'm good. I'm okay. Okay. So if all of you noticed, we used to have NAD level 4, which was comparable to an RID certification. And then there was, in addition, a level 3. And are we okay with the levels that we listed? So do we want to go back to a level 4? Leslie?
My thought is to change to level 3. My reasoning for that is the person who has not taken the RID or has not passed with a level 3, RID does recognize that as the satisfactory for certification. You could say that we would go back to level 4, but NAD doesn't offer that anymore. So the idea that you've passed or RID certification, you have that, you've passed the test, and NAD level 3 is certified as well. But if the person passes NAD level 3 and then has no degree or hasn't had the years behind them is it still satisfactory, but has passed the performance? So, I think my support is behind NAD level 3.
Further discussion? So I have a few comments about the BEI. It's interesting that when we take a look at the RID certification and the BEI, RID requires 8 CEUs in 4 years, while the BEI requires 10 CEUs, right? I think within 4 years. Is that right? Is it within 4 years or 5 years? I can't remember. But it's 10. Now, reading the BEI basic certification, what that means.
It's 5 years.
So if you open this up to the general community and you talk about the interpreting community, it may not be fair. So I think that it may be more fair to say level 3 or not level 3.
I'm sorry. It's 5 years. It's a 5-year cycle.
Thank you. So are we good with what I said? Okay.
Mhm.
So we're going to move on to the third page.
Do you mind? Oh, excuse
So
me.
it's saying,
One moment, please, before you put that up. Just one moment, please. 1 minute. Oh, Susan, where did you go? Oh, there we are. I'm sorry. I just had to leave for a minute. Now I'm back. Excuse me. Sorry. I wanted to let you know that I was going to shut off my camera and just a moment and be right back. I'll be back in just a minute. My apologies.
no worries, that's fine. And I wanted to make an addition too, that in the past, at the December meeting, we had a discussion and we decided to remove the educational specialist language because that was not representative of certification because, and I think that we had removed that from the full licensure part. And we were discussing provisional license. And I think we will wait until Sue returns before I share my screen on that language. But was there something else that we wanted to discuss, or did we want to discuss something else that came? Or do you want to take a 2-minute break to allow for Sue to take care of what she needs to take care of, and then we'll come back? All right. All right, I'm going to shut the video and we won't be tempted to chit chat. So we will take a little break until Sue is back. All right. Okay, we just wanted to take a little break and figured we wanted to make sure that we included you in the discussion. So we just figured we would take advantage of a short break and we are back. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I'm going to move further down on the screen. Okay. So during our meeting, January 30th, we talked about the EIPA and we agreed that the EIPA is not officially recognized as as a national certification. So we decided to include it possibly in the provisional licensure language. We did offer it up to the working group. So we did want to thank Sue for your leadership and the work that you have done with that working group in developing recommendations. And we are excited to see what came out of your discussions and your problem solving and solutions with your working group. I think you had 3 or 4 different examples. So go ahead,
Yes.
Sue.
Yes, I did. Thank you so much. Our groups did get a chance to meet, and we had a lot of discussion about the EIPA. Exactly. We wanted to talk about those different scoring, and we offered 3 suggestions here. The provisional license, yes, is one. And we could have a provisional license with a written test only, or a performance with a minimum of 4.0 scoring. And then the final was the probationary performance with a score of 3.5. There was a lot of discussion. One person, I believe, mentioned that on the scoring of 3.8 should be considered. Some people agreed with that and others did not. There was a variety of opinions on what the score should be. We wanted to get the board's perspective on this and thoughts and considerations and their ideas for the provisional license and the scoring.
Richie? Sue? Correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that the EIPA is actually working on some modifications with their testing and their scoring system. Aren't they going through like some sort of a review currently?
Well, I think the last time, maybe let me back up first and start again. In the very beginning, I believe, was it 2023? Could have been 20. There was a letter asking questions, asking us a survey of these same ideas, but there was no mention about the test
In the
being
NAIP.
amended or the EIPA becoming a certification. Currently, if you check the website, there's a structure there that uses the word certified by 2026. But so far, there has not been a single update. We've heard absolutely nothing. However, I do know that the EIPA will become a certification. Am I right in that thought? By having a degree or scoring a 4.0, a minimum of a 4.0. The timeline for that is a huge question mark. So I have no updated information to offer you.
So I say we stick with the passing of the written test and a minimum score of 4.0. And then when the NAIE makes their modifications and they have updates and have a newer system, then we'll look out for that. Leslie? Sue, maybe you know the answer to this or not. And I'm not sure if Beth Ann is on the call. I know that she did a lot of work related to this. Does the EIPA have standard scoring, or is it like you can have a 3.3, a 3.55, or is it set like 3.0, 3.25, 3.5? Like, how are their scores broken down? Do you know?
You can have a 3.1, 3.2. That's possible.
So it's a wide range then, is what you're talking,
Yes.
like from point one to, okay.
Yes.
I want to make a comment as well, this is Jacob. I know that we are discussing the EIPA and the 4.0 being recognized for licensure, but then there's others that are not. But the NAIE is proposing a written test, going by degree, and that folks who have those pieces can submit for licensure or provisional licensure. So I do feel that we should modify our system so that we don't have to continue to make modifications to our provisional licensing language when the NAIE comes time to set their standardization for possibly their certification process. So there's a certain the educational interpreters around the states. I think there are not many folks who have certain licensures, like 3.8. Most common, we have seen 3.5 or below. And having the specific data is not available, or at least I don't know where it's available. So I don't know that the EIPA holds fruitful data, like really good data at all. While others have like an interpreting directory, I don't believe the EIPA holds such a directory or holds such data. These are just some thoughts that I have. Leslie? I know that we've had previous discussion in educational specialists and also provisional licensing, and we've referred to a written test. And in doing some continued research about that, the EIPA has a written test that only talks about English proficiency. There is no discussion, and it does not address, and I'm not saying that that's not important, because it is important to be fluent in English and in sign language, of course. But is there a possibility that that could require passing a written test and then maybe reducing that minimum score from 4.0 to 3.8? But I know that in RID, the former educational K to 12, their minimum score was 4.0. And then the folks who had an RID certification, they could not work in general in educational settings because they didn't have certain pieces of the specific requirements. So while I think that most of the complaints that that score was too high were they only from interpreters, or were they from parents? Were they from family members? So are we acquiescing to the interpreting community, or are we supporting parents of deaf children and other members of the community? Well, I think the goal is to just remind ourselves that that once children who are deaf learn language, you can't go back. They are this board, and I represent the Maryland Organization for the Deaf and the deaf community's perspective, and they would propose 4.0 as being that minimum scoring. And I'd like to add to that, Richie, that Maryland provide that letter asking the board to make a decision based on 4.0. I think they actually did submit that, if I remember correctly. Did they not? Yes, they did. Sue?
Honestly, I support the 4.0 score. That's what I would want. But a different perspective would be for the interpreter who can't get that score. Many educational interpreters have resigned or left the profession because what happened within the system.
What happens with the deaf and hard of hearing children if the pool of interpreters shrinks terribly because these folks are backing out of or leaving the profession because they cannot achieve that minimum scoring?
So in balance, I would like to have that top score. These are our children. It's these children are our cherished future. So they need that access to communication. Yes, and at the same time, I do know that interpreters who can't get that minimum score
Yeah.
are out there. So it's the balance, balancing that situation out.
Uh,
I've been thinking about that long and hard for quite some time of where the solution lies and how do we balance it?
Leslie, sorry for interrupting. Um, and maybe it forces the school system to hire from agencies and agencies who are well aware of the licensure. I under the piece about going through an agency, but RID, the BEI, does not have a forte of educational interpreters, from my understanding, correct? They focus more on community interpreters. So I do agree to elevate the profession and elevate standardization for interpreting requirements and skill sets. And we definitely don't want to shrink the pool of interpreters. And we have some children who are deaf that have no interpreters at all, none at all. And so it is a difficult way in because I support the needs of the children who are deaf and hard of hearing. And also, I don't want to see the pool of interpreters shrink because I want to make sure that the services are available. So whether or not, I don't know if the answer is abiding to the 3.5 or what number, Richie? So I think when we talk about the provisional licensing, we are lowering the score to a degree, but we need to clarify to put the accountability on the school districts and the school system to elevate the skills, elevate the standards. So we can add this language to the regs that the school system needs to provide support to the interpreting community so that they can meet the standards. And you're right. We don't want to create barriers to these professional interpreters. And the school systems can take the responsibility in making sure that these interpreters pass the written exam and possibly by providing mentors, providing some sort of support so that interpreters can, their skill sets can be elevated to meet the standards. And this way, the school is taking on some of that responsibility as opposed to having the regulation and then not providing anything to support the interpreters that have to abide by them. Leslie? So an understanding that this provisional license is a temporary period of time because what our goal is to provide the technical changes in the educational arena. So initially, it is a 3-year provisional license with a 3.5 score, and you have 2 years to get the 3.5 to a 4.0 that will meet the standard, with the caveat that the school system will provide support to help interpreters become better prepared to meet the standards and allowing them in the first 3 years with the understanding that if they want to renew, that they need to do that before the provisional expires. Any further discussion? This is Jacob. Well, how do you feel, Sue? How do you feel about that suggestion?
I think that's good, a good place to compromise, and make an agreement there that the school system as well as the interpreter both have the onus to provide time to improve their score. My concerns come because their educational degree is just 3 years. That opportunity is not really a lot of time to raise their scores. So in that, I have many.
I think too, when a child is going through the educational system, they're going through that system for 13 years. So that child having that interpreter is going to have that interpreter for quite a long time. And if that interpreter doesn't have, how do I say this properly, have the appropriate or does not hold a good enough score, whatever we decide, then that child is suffering for 5 years with a third of their education. And that's a long time for them to be going through subpar education. And that is such a crucial time for a child's education. So I think, like I said, it's a good way to approach this when we say 3 years of the 3.5, and then you extend it for 2 years, but then you have to have that 4.0 score. Um, in the hopes that hopefully we can make that technical change and that will lead to more interpreters with full licensure and less with the provisional. This is Jacob. So for the provisional, we are proposing a renewal. So if after 3 years, you can apply for 2 more years during the provisional. And they also have to have 2 CEOs, 1 hour of PPO. And that would help with the onus and even the benefit level to have the school system support the interpreters. So what have we landed on as far as the EIPA score? Where do we want to be with the educational interpreter? Do we want to list an expectation of 3.5, 3.7, 4.0?
I have a question for you, Sue. Uh, it seems like the goal would be 4.0, right? That's the goal. That's the threshold.
For
Okay.
permanent licensure.
So, let's see how to put this. I'm not sure if for the interpreters, they can reach that 4.0 in this time frame. And what would be required to start? Would it be a 3.5 with the expectation within 2 years to raise to a 4.0? Yes, let me just back up just a moment. This is Sue now. So the scoring means an interpreter who has achieved a 4.0 score means the deaf student has 50%,
85.
85% access to the information that's being presented in that classroom with a 4.0. If, however, the interpreter scores a 3.5, that translates into less information. I don't remember the exact number that was given to that. I think it's 60% accessible information, 60%
Wow.
of what's occurring in the room. So we're almost at the point of only half. And that's where my concerns lie. And that's what the numbers mean. That's what it looks like in the classroom of access to information. So, I mean, it's, this is why I'm losing sleep overnight. So that explains where the scores come from and the implication of those numbers. So if we're talking about 3 years at 3.5, and then to renew again with the requirement of a 4.0 in within 2 years, or like, are we working on it during that time?
So first, knowing that percentage of access, oh my gosh. I want to pull back on my 3.5, my 3.5. And really, I would suggest a 3.7. I don't know. I mean, this is education. This is not a little thing. This is, not how much a car costs. So I would say 3.75 maybe to shrink that window to that 75% access in the classroom. Ugh. But you can apply for a provisional with the 3.5 maybe, and then work 3 years and then apply to renew, but you have to meet the 4.0 requirement, because that is also with the understanding that after you apply for your provisional, you cannot reapply for your provisional. You have up to 5 years and then that's that. And this is Jacob, he said, this is to clarify. So are you, we don't do the five. So are you talking about 3.7? Oh, okay, so there is no 0.05. Okay. Yeah, that's what Sue was saying. So there's like 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. Like, okay, so then maybe move 3.7 to 3.8. So there's no 0.5. Okay. Not to be nitpicky, but I think that with that calculation of the 80% access, that 3.8, it's closer to 80%. Yeah, so that would be closer to 80%. I have a question for you, Leslie. Like you were saying that you wanted the 3.7 for 3 years and then get pulled up to 4.0. So for general licensure, we record, I don't think for the RID certification, there is no provisional, right? Like, why is that different? Whereas in education, you get to score one number and then come up to the 4.0, because RID gives you 5 years to take and pass. Once you take and pass your written, you have 5 years to be completely certified. Also, the other piece only touches on education. It doesn't touch on medical, legal. It doesn't touch on education. The provisional only does. So we are limiting a 5 year for provisional. They cannot actually apply for a provisional after 5 years. So what's wrong with the 3.7 for 3 years? Or if you turn in your two CEUs, then you can renew. Yeah, I guess we could. I guess I was just trying to get closer to what the deaf community and the parents of deaf children provided in our feedback methods, because with the parents, they did not want interpreters who had less than a 4.0. I mean, who should we be listening to? And also, I also remember, this is off the point, but not so much. It's relevant. We started this session talking about the educational interpreters, and interpreters feel like when you remove the bachelor's degree piece, that it lowers the expectation. And why? Because there is a question of providing more money from the school system. So if you take all of these courses, that means that you can earn more salary wise. You can demand a higher price point. So I think that when we think about the end user, the consumers are the end users. Okay, so we are doing a time check. It's close to 8:15. This is Richie. I think we may have to hit the pause button and table this section and keep moving and come back to it. So as far as the section to renew, we are talking about submitting 2 CEUs, one being a PPO. Is everyone okay with that requirement? Okay, all right.
Yes.
So let's move forward and go to the next page.
Yep, all good. All good. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, and we're going to move to discussion. Okay, so this does not require further discussion, no? Okay, so we're going to go to the next page. Are we okay with this page? Oh, one moment. Sue, you good?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm good. Sorry. Yes, I'm good.
And how about this section? Okay. So I want to emphasize so it seemed clear that the board was not comfortable with the language of the interpreter's appeal pieces. So we wanted to seek the guidance of the Assistant Attorney General, Ethan, to discuss these pieces and edit for proper language of the regulations. So I am going to ask Ethan if he wants to pop on, if he has anything to add with this process. Hello. Not much to add. Understanding that you all have concerns about due process, who makes the final decision, after the fact finding and applying this discipline, doing my research, I think it's important for the board to make a final decision on what that process looks like. And in a minimum of meeting what would be considered due process. And I think that one of the talking points is if it would go back and forth between ODHH and the SBSLI. So I think those are the main points I wanted to emphasize. And this is Jacob. Some of the community members felt like it was awkward when they file a grievance and then the interpreter presents their findings to the board. And if they find that there is a penalty to be instituted, or if the interpreter would go to ODHH, and maybe if ODHH disagrees with the decision that was already made at the board level, and we wanted to reduce the chance of it going round and round. So I think if you have an interpreter who's filing a complaint with the ODHH, that's not considered an appeal because there wasn't a decision. If there was a decision based on allegations, and then that would apply to the ODHH, at that point, ODHH would do some fact finding exercises and gather evidence from both sides based on what ODHH thinks happened. and then present that evidence. And that would be presented in front of this board. So based on the current draft, it's possible that ODHH could make the final decision. But I think full evidence has to be placed in front of the board. And I do understand your concerns related to this. So if I'm confused, I'm sure a community member is going to be confused. I think that can be seen three different ways. So from my understanding, the GODHH receives a complaint, verifies that all of the required information is included, turns it over to the board does their research, and makes maybe adding some language that they've heard from both sides of the entity, meaning the person who filed the complaint and the side of the person that the complaint is being filed against or involving. And then if there's a decision that's made, then the interpreter can file an appeal against the GODHH or the board, because when the interpreter files an appeal, it's possible that they can say, I don't agree with the board's decision. I want to go above the board's decision to an entity that makes a final decision. No, is that correct? No, because the GODHH is not necessarily above the the State Board of Sign Language Interpreters. So this is represented. This is a board who listens to the evidence, reviews the fact finding. The GODHH will present that, and this board is who will have to conduct the hearing. I myself am also confused. There are other agencies. There's delegates who are authorized to review certain hearings. But as far as this State Board for Sign Language Interpreters, so this is Richie. So in other words, so that means that theoretically, the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing can collect this information, review it, present it to the board, and the board can make a final decision based on the summary report that is presented by the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. I actually see that as a good process. I don't know that we will require this due process, and then maybe also not even offer the opportunity for an appeal. Well, the current drafted regs, before your suggestions of giving it to the Governor's Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing to make the final decision, there would be included fact finding. And if the interpreter disagrees with that fact finding, could present an appeal. That could actually kick it back to the State Board for Sign Language Interpreting to make a final decision. And it's possible that they could disagree with the fact finding presented by the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Whereas if one entity makes a decision, then it's possible that the interpreter can request a hearing, and then a fact-finding exercise can be instituted. A decision would be made, and then an interpreter could file an appeal. In that light, this board would make the final decision and decide whether or not there would be a penalty or not towards the interpreter. So that means that we should go back to the original language and do away with the edits that we worked on. This is Leslie. I'm sorry. So I think how you just defined it was different than the first time. So the board makes the first decision, the interpreter appeals, ODHH does their investigating, and then I think you remove the appeal process. I think that's what we wanted. Sorry, I interrupted you, Leslie. Sorry for interrupting you. No, we do not plan on including the word appeal. In other words, that's what we're talking about. What Ethan means is that, so let's say evidence is collected, it's presented to the board, we review the evidence, we say yes, the interpreter should be penalized. The penalty is instituted. If the interpreter, let's say, feels that our penalty or whatever is not appropriate, they can request a hearing through ODHH. Then ODHH will hear both sides, review the fact finding. ODHH will conduct their reporting, present it back to the board, and review on the interpreter's presentation and also the ODHH fact finding. So then it could be that ODHH says, okay, we support the board or we support the side of the interpreter. And it could be that we could end up in the same place in reality. Well, no, it's different. This is Ethan. So currently, the current proposition is to delete the last step. Once ODHH makes a decision, you cannot appeal back to the board because in reality, the board will inherently support ODHH's decision. Sue?
Really quickly, ODHH and ODAH, that's my confusion. We have two boards here. So if the interpreter disagrees with the board's decision and makes that request,
For OAH.
that's right. Okay, that's what they can do. The OAHH is where my confusion came. Okay, thank you for that point of clarification.
Okay, so that's another quick question for Ethan. So if the board decides to institute a penalty and the interpreter goes through OAHH and they say, no, you have no evidence, so does that mean that it has to go back to the board and the initial decision? Yes. So in that light, we would keep the original language. Leslie? So the
I think it
board,
would be,
I think the original language says that the board will support the OAH's decision. So if an interpreter does not like the initial decision, they can request a hearing with OAH, go through their process, they make a recommendation. And really, we have to decide whether or not we are going to follow OAH's decision. Because again, if, I don't feel like an appeal back to the board is worthwhile. Okay, Richie? Pretty much when the board takes a look at the evidence and there's a complaint presented, our decision is going to be supported or not. So I think that we create it where it doesn't come back around. I think Ethan was emphasizing that the board makes the final decision on the penalty towards the interpreter. And that is not OAH, doesn't make the final decision. So suppose there is a fact finding and there is a wrongdoing that is found and it comes back to us, we could reverse our decision. We would have that option, or we would remain with our original decision, depending on the situation, of course. And again, I go back to being fine with the original language. Leslie? I agree. And I feel like we need to also add language that says the board holds the final decision with a recommendation via a recommendation from OAH, because we could change the decision. And why would an interpreter even go to OAH? If you remember in the initial discussion, many communities and even myself, we are not trained in fact finding. So I'm not a lawyer. I can hear both sides, and we can, all of us, use our own perspective, our moral compass, etc. And a decision can come to be, and that person has the right to say, no, I don't feel like I agree with that, and go to a hearing. I don't know if it's fair to revert back to another decision. That just doesn't sit right with me. Okay, so for Ethan, that process, how does this process go for other boards? So if it does, then why should we be any different than some of these other boards that exist? Well, I think that the board would need to go through some training as to how to best handle this process. And are other boards trained? I think that there are agencies where the fact finding, the recommendations are presented to OAH, and I think it's very rare where a board or another agency is not going through that. I think there's consequences because there are boards that represent the community and they make a decision based on what the appropriate consequences are on following the violation. I think that they use the fact finding and then make the best decision whether or not the interpreter has to accept the consequences of the violation, or if the OAH comes to decide that, let's say, whether the interpreter has committed fraud or did commit this violation, it could be that a recommendation is presented that they would lose their license. And then it could be that a specific case where the board decides that the interpreter, while losing their license at the time, could in the future, maybe instead of losing the license, have that be a suspension of license for a period of time to give the interpreter an opportunity to improve in the future. And after OAH makes a decision based on fact finding, whether or not it's that or a final decision, including consequences. So that is something that I don't know that OAH can handle both of. This is Richie. I feel like if we don't feel comfortable moving forward with a final decision, we've definitely been discussing multiple ifs. So again, like I mentioned before, this doesn't have to be an end all be all written in stone. This is Jacob. I agree. And I definitely don't want to, just for the sake of being different, be different than all of these other boards. And I just want to revisit this piece where what language is most appropriate for this situation.
I agree. I would say leave it as the way it is now. We can visit again later. You know, if we have an incident that arrives at our desk, we can take a look at it at that point.
Is everyone okay with that?
Uh,
I know that there's 5 of us. I also would like to know how this is going to go. I mean, I would like to know, like, are there other teams that go through a training or are they just baptized by fire? I think that some of these groups do go through a systems training. Um, I also am familiar with some of these situations being presented to a board as an absolute last resort. I I don't think that it is often that boards receive appeals. Another suggestion would be for the board to partner with the EPS system within RID. And then, and Richie is saying, yeah, maybe that is something that we can look at. Yeah, I have a question. I mean, if a board wants to have training, can we ask ODHH to provide some sort of training to the board? Is that something that can be requested? Ashila or Ethan, can you answer that? This is Ethan. I cannot answer that. I think that would be up to ODHH. May I recommend Ashila answering that? Ashila, did you see the question? Please repeat the question. The question is related to the appeals process and the board making decisions. Is it possible for ODHH to provide some sort of training for the board to be better equipped
yeah,
to handle these appeals?
yes, it is. We can provide that.
Thank you for repeating. Okay. Leslie, do you feel a little bit better about that? Yeah, and I think that that would be included, um, that could be included in the board's retreat so that we feel confident and comfortable and we're able to show our community that we have the confidence, having been trained in this arena. Okay. All right. So initially we will go back to the original language. And let's go back to that. If you take a look here, everyone finished reviewing this? Okay. So I want to clarify in the beginning, our first regs, we put language under the agency that the agency needs to adhere to and abide by whatever the deaf consumer's preferences, whether that is VRI, whether that is an in-person interpreter. So we wanted to make sure that there was language that was covered, whether that is a direct hire or an agency, and that is for deaf, hard of hearing, or deaf blind consumer. And instead of going through the agency or direct hire interpreter, they would present that preference to the business that's making the request. That make sense? Okay, so that is that piece of the regs. So now let's revisit the EIPA. So now I ask, what is your pleasure? Sue, you want to lead this discussion?
Yes, I'd like to add that Boys Town, no, was it that? No. I can email everyone the paper that explains the exact gradation with the explanation to the point systems for each score. If you give me a minute to find that.
Okay.
I'm searching for it. I'm sorry. Of course you can't find it when you want it.
Okay. So what are some of your suggestions with the EIPA piece? We should have something so that we can move forward. I think it really comes down to the score, whether that be 3.7, 3.5, and 4.0, right?
3.7 for the provisional license, a 3.7 score, and continuing to work to the 4.0.
And that's with a passed written test. So for the EIPA, you would have a passed written and this certain EIPA score. Sue was saying that they meaning the interpreters applying for the provisional licensure in Maryland, they would have to have 2 out of 3, the 3.7, and then work towards a 4.0. So,
Oh.
did the community have concerns about the past written and the EIPA?
Yes, and it was because of the cost. The concerns were about the cost of that, of the testing, and for the interpreter paying for that test in comparison to what they were earning. Because you're earning a lower salary until you pass the test. So they were worried. There was concern about that for both those two areas for the provisional.
Richie, I think it's important to emphasize that representing the Maryland deaf community, and not to sound like we are not sensitive to the interpreter's burden as it relates to cost, definitely something to think about. But the children who are deaf are actually paying the price if their access is subpar.
Leslie?
Understood. And I can empathize about cost. But understandably, in running a Maryland interpreting program in Maryland, I don't know that CCC requires all the students to take the CASLI before graduation, that is a lot more than the EIPA's written. So I get it. But if we're expecting students or new interpreters to take the exam for the provisional licenses, RID members' costs continue to increase. So we get it. And again, it's not about being insensitive, but at the same time, what the intention is behind the law. And if the written test is valuable and more evidence-based of that interpreter's knowledge and skill set, then Paige.
I have a question for you, Sue. When the interpreter takes the written test, and then we're to say passes, do they have to come back and take it again to continue for a licensure? Or you pass it and you're once and done? That's it, you pass it, you're done. So then why the concerns about the cost? This is just the feedback that I got from the interpreting community. And they wanted to add the Casali ethical test is in English.
Bimodal.
So the Casali test ethics portion of it would cover some of the performance skills in both modes, whereas the other test is just basic English testing. So that's just one language. So I know the ethics portions, I'm sorry, is just based in one. But that's how it is set up. But initially, why not just take the written test from RID and then do both the Casali test and the EIPA test to realize that this one is will have 2 language exposures compared to the EIPA is just all English based. It's an assessment, true, of skills, but that's only for the written test. I recently learned that. I took my tests a long time ago. So that's what's currently happening. So the Casali has the ethical part in comparison to the EIPA, which does not.
So it seems that the provisional license, you want that to include the EIPA written exam and 3.5 with school support, school system support.
3.7, you mean 3.7, right?
Right, 3.7? Leslie? Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's more balanced for now.
Richie? I propose that we, the board, approve this edit. Yes, with substance. Who
I
was second?
second that.
Paige, you're seconding? I'm assuming there is no further discussion and we are proceeding with a vote. All those in favor to edit with substance? Okay, so moved, carried. So we have done our job. So after the meeting has concluded, we will edit based on our discussions today. So we will revert back to the original language for the appeals process. And we will submit these to Ursula after our assistant attorney general reviews the documents. And Leslie, can we ask Ursula with ODHH to post, let's say, the next 3 or 4 dates for we can have all of the information shared with the community and the board? Just a quick clarification too. We don't actually, so we go through DSD, the Division of State Documents. So can we ask for the dates of the next several sessions then, so that those can be posted within DSD, the Division of State Documents? Ashila? Do you mind repeating? So this is Ushla. So for the dates, I actually need to wait until you submit. I don't think there's no scheduled dates. So I believe that that has to be submitted April 4th. And then for the following month, you mean? So it really depends. It depends on when you give me the clean copy. Okay. But DSD doesn't give a clear answer as to when they accept. So let's say, for example, if we give it to you next Monday, I can get back to you with an answer. Okay. So we want to know if it can get posted so that the community can have access to that information as well. Well, it's the same website as the Google website, so that the Google website will remain the same, but we do have to wait for new dates before changing. This is Jacob. Leslie, that's what we've been doing. So after Ethan makes his edits or makes his review, then we can go ahead and post it on our Google site. And that's the same procedure that we've been using up until now. My concern is when the 30 days opens and occurs for the opportunity for public comment to occur. It feels like it would be more fair to the community to demonstrate transparency so that we can release the dates that the information will be posted. This is Jacob. From what I understand, we are in the last stages. So DSD is ready to receive the information so that they can post the regs. Ethan will review, and as soon as those are approved, then those can be submitted to Ushla. Ushla can submit them to DSD. We definitely don't have to go through the additional steps. Ushla, am I correct in that? That is correct. Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. Technically, we need to make sure that they are in the right format so that the template is correct to be able to post the regs. So as soon as you send that to me, those will be inserted into the correct template. And that's as much transparency that we can demonstrate. Yes. Okay, that helps a lot. Okay. I thought it was going to be taking every 2 weeks from a posting standpoint, so I misunderstood initially. And thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Ashla. Okay. So now we are closing the discussion on the regulations. So from what we understand, we do not have any comments that we need to respond to through ODHH. So I say that we go ahead and move to a motion to adjourn. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for the rich discussion for this evening. And we are definitely excited to see what the community thinks about the edited regulations. Hopefully, we are addressing the concerns of all of the subgroups, and this will help minimize confusion, minimize concern, minimize any kind of aversion to community partners. We want to make sure that we are addressing all of our subgroups, the interpreters. Thank you to Ushla, ODHH, the interpreters that were here this evening too tonight. And we can move to adjourn. Okay. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you. All right. Have a good evening.
Bye.
and we will stop the